I don't quite get how I can be so competent in some areas of my life and so completely incapable in other areas of my life. And you beat the shit out of yourself, you think something is wrong with you, you start to ruminate, or you feel like you're the one that's always dropping the ball. And underneath it all was undiagnosed.
I've heard you say that you've felt incompetent, had issues with relationships and friendships, and that you were fairly lost until at the age of 47,
Yep.
I believe, you were diagnosed with ADHD, and it changed everything for you. Talk to me about how that impacted your relationships, and then why the hell ADHD actually was the thing that allowed you to make that change.
Boys and girls have ADHD at largely the same rates. Girls have been profoundly underdiagnosed, and there is a reason why. The reason why is because when the experts started studying ADHD, like when you hear the word ADHD, what would you think the symptoms would be if you're diagnosing it in a kid?
Scatty, just a kid going crazy, doing things, yelling, throwing things, reading, then laughing, not paying attention.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's exactly how boys are. So most boys are like, that was our son, like, like this and rocking in the seat
Right.
and, like that kind of thing. And like hand up, got to go to the bathroom all the time, bouncing around, inappropriate, interrupting class. And so when they first studied it, they kind of had this hallmark of this jittery or fidgety or lack of impulse control, inability to focus. Now, the interesting thing is when a girl of that age has the inability to focus her attention, boys get restless and it kind of goes through their body. Girls go in. They daydream. They get quieter. They get very self-critical. And so while boys are acting out, girls are shutting down. And when they studied ADHD, I think it was in the late 70s, they only studied boys. And so the DSM, the diagnostic, studies manual, the criteria for diagnosing it only applied to boys. There were a profound number of young women, myself included, who started developing anxiety in their teens and were treated for anxiety. And I will sit here today and say, despite the fact that I know that I have childhood trauma, I fundamentally believe that my anxiety spiraling out of control was due to the fact that I had dyslexia and ADHD, and it went undiagnosed for years. And when you don't understand the way that your mind works, and your mind is not working in a way that it's expected to work, you beat the shit out of yourself, you think something is wrong with you, you start to ruminate, you start to worry about things, and that is the beginning of that alarm called anxiety. And so there's this lost generation of us for decades, Lisa, who were diagnosed with anxiety or depression in high school and college years, treated for anxiety, when really the core issue underneath it all was undiagnosed, either some type of learning disability or difference, or it was attention issues. And the vast majority of women who get diagnosed with ADHD get diagnosed later in life when they are having their kids go through elementary and middle school, and their kids are being diagnosed with ADHD or dyslexia, and you sit in a pediatrician's office and you're like, geez, this sounds a lot like me. And that's exactly what happened to me. That's why I was diagnosed at 47. Our fourth grader was going through all of the testing for the IEPs because they were telling us he was acting out in school and he also couldn't read. And the school told us that it was a behavioral issue. And so thankfully we were in a position at that point to hire a neuropsych and spend the money to get the testing done. And when we got the testing done, I said to his pediatrician, holy shit, this sounds like me. Do you think I could have ADHD? And this pediatrician who had known me, Lisa, for 16 years, leaned forward and said, do I think you have ADHD? Mel Robbins you're the most ADHD person I have ever met in my entire life. I'm like, Mark, what do you mean? He said, well, you'll go years and forget to bring your kids in for their well appointments. I'm like, oh, that's true. You'll tell me you're going to call me back with something, that you never call. And I'm sitting there and he goes, and I'm like, why didn't you tell me? And he's like, I'm not your doctor. And then I went on and got properly diagnosed and started taking Adderall. And it was like immediately game over. Completely understood like what was going on and what had been missing all along.
Dude, this is huge. The idea of the misdiagnosis that we feel like, or we think it's been anxiety this whole time, we've been treating the anxiety, like it's really hit me as you were talking as well. I don't have kids, so thank you for you bringing this to my life. But like as you were talking, I have trouble with my B's and D's and my G's and J's, even to this day. Now growing up, I had the story in my head that I was stupid.
Yeah.
Other people don't have problems with G's and J's, and I do. And so I would get anxiety over spelling tests, and I would get anxiety over sitting at the dining room table with my dad if he's given, us math equations. And I always, with the anxiety, it then brought the shame, right? And then that I'm stupid. So I don't want people to see that I'm stupid. And then that gave me a story of who I was about myself. Yeah. And that, to this day, at 44,
yeah,
feeling stupid is my trigger. And it's from the childhood because I'd never thought, and I never heard growing up, like you said about the lost generation, it never occurred to me that it was a different way of learning.
Yeah, and you didn't talk about it. You go inward.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And the other thing
you
is...
can't talk about it. You don't want people to know you're stupid.
And yes,
that's
of course.
how I thought.
Well, and if you think about the way human beings are, right? Like, what are the things that you're really good at, Lisa?
Drawing and self-soothing.
Okay, great. So drawing. So let's just take drawing. Is it hard for you to direct your focus when you draw?
Not at all.
Why?
I get lost in it.
There you go. That is a classic example of the reason why people often get misdiagnosed with ADHD, because you can lose yourself in something. That's why so many...
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not about focus. It's about your brain's ability to direct that focus in appropriate ways. Mm-hmm. So a surprising sign that you may be dealing with an attention issue is getting lost in things. Like you literally look up and are like, 3 hours went by? Mm. And, that's why we missed it with our son, because he would play video games or play with Legos for hours. And then the second that we asked him to do something that felt really hard or difficult, he would revolt. And it's because it takes so much cognitive energy, the cognitive load, for his brain to try to do those things when he didn't have, and I wish I could it's been a long day, but I wish I could think of the word, like he didn't have the
neural wiring.
The neural wiring. And here's the reason why I know this, because we were lucky enough to get him into a school called Carroll. Carroll is one of the leading schools on the planet for language-based learners. And it only goes up to 8th grade. They have this research partnership going on with MIT. They are in the forefront of this. We were so lucky. And they were doing this occupational intervention with Oakley. So imagine that this logo, that we had a big yellow line down the center. And one of the things that I watched them do with him is that they would light up one side, like the right side, and Oak would have to touch a dot that was lit up with his left hand. Right side, left side, touch it with his right hand, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And what they were doing is they were creating flexibility in his brain. Through this sort of occupational intervention, they were creating the neural wiring, or whatever the hell you call it. And so his dyslexia is all but remediated. But he is now somebody who still struggles with, directing the attention when it's required. But as he's aged and as he's had these interventions, and as we know what we're dealing with, the wiring has occurred. Mm. And he's a totally different student. He's a totally different person. But you're right. If you don't understand the way that you learn, or your challenges with either executive functioning or attention, you tend to go, I'm fucking stupid. There's something wrong with me. How come everybody else's hand is shooting up after they've read that paragraph and I'm still rereading the first sentence? Well, it might be attention. It might, and attention's also got to do with your processing, because if you can't hold your attention on this paragraph because you haven't forged all these connections, the second you read this sentence, it's out of your brain. And so you reread it and you reread it and you reread it. If somebody tells you the story, you'll remember it, but there's something about processing written words that's not sticking up here.
Yeah.
And so it just becomes this loop, which is why the anxiety develops. And so the good news is that, typically whenever I talk about this topic, the posts go crazy, the podcast episode goes crazy, people don't know where to turn. I think there are surprising signs to this, one being hyperfocus, another one being super self-critical, another one being realizing, wow, I have high competency in some areas, but I just feel like a total loser with an inability to complete certain tasks or stay on track with things. These all might be signs. You leaving coffee cups. Every time I travel, I lose something. A pair of sunglasses, a jacket. It's a joke at this point.
Your suitcase at the airport.
My suitcase at the airport. Yes, like every time. And that's never going to change. And so one of the great benefits of knowing what you're dealing with is you can have more compassion for yourself.
That's literally what I was going to say. Like, how much more grace do you give yourself? Instead of saying, oh my God, I'm so stupid, you do give yourself that compassion and say, okay, well, this is part of what I'm dealing with. This is who I am.
Yeah, and thank God for it, because I am so verbal and I am such an accomplished speaker because I had to overcompensate in that area. And so this is not a liability. Yeah. This is actually, in your, language, a superpower, because it brings something out in you. And, that's the thing that I really why I want to encourage women in particular to look into this, because it gets impacted also by hormones. So when you hit menopause, as I am, or if you have, a cycle that's particularly challenging, or you've just had a baby or a miscarriage or PCOS or a hysterectomy or whatever, it profoundly impacts your ability to focus. I learned this from Dr. Jackie, who we had on the show. It's because a woman's body is kind of this network, as she explained it. Her words, not mine. And estrogen is the fuel of the network. And so when your estrogen is out of whack, your estrogen is also in your brain. And it is a really important hormone when it comes to attention and memory. And so that fogginess that they talk about with menopause or after having a baby or when you're pregnant is very real because of the changes in estrogen. And so understanding whether you're dealing with a learning style difference, or you're dealing with an attention issue, or you're dealing with executive functioning, number one, it helps you get the interventions you need. So the next question I know that I'm going to get asked is, well, what about medication? What are the options? Well, so in certain situations, I will take a very small dose of fast-acting Adderall. Today, for example, did not take it. Why? Because I knew I would be in an environment here where I'd be focused, because the environment focuses me. Another thing that works really well is microdosing with psilocybin or psilocybin. I always say it wrong, but I don't really care. So the microdosing, if you can figure out how to get on that protocol and do it supervised with a therapist, that can be super helpful as a protocol.
How often do you do that?
Me?
Yeah.
I have not done that consistently. It's 5 days on, 2 days off. And one of the reasons why I have not done it consistently is because I wanted to make sure that I was figuring out my hormones with menopause first. And we've had a bunch of stuff going on at work. And so I didn't want to be trying the psilocybin protocol because it's not something you dabble in.
Right.
If you're going to do it, you really need to do it with somebody that is overseeing what you're doing, that you're doing integration therapy with it. And honestly, I couldn't commit, at least a year ago when I first looked into it, to being rigorous around it. But it's something that I absolutely want to do. I plan on doing it this summer when things are a little bit slower. But I have two very close friends that are completely off any kind of prescription drugs that they had been using for ADHD, and love, love, love the psilocybin, cybacillin, however the hell you say it, protocol. And the other thing about it is that it does require you to not just take it and go on with your life, but to take it and to truly notice what you notice and to tune way more in. But that is something that a ton of people do. Believe it or not, caffeine is a really helpful thing. When Oakley was younger, he did not tolerate a lot of the medications well, and so he did tolerate caffeine, and that would help a lot. Another thing that can help is more snacking of higher fat foods, like we would give Oakley a chocolate milk. This goes back to the fuel in the brain. So he could drink a chocolate milk and get a little bit of lift and ability to focus a little bit more in the afternoon. So there are a lot of supplements that you can take on the natural side, but again, get some sort of health expert in here to talk about that. I'm just waving the flag saying, hey, you're not crazy. You're not like hormonal. There is nothing wrong with you if you're the kind of person that turns on the bathtub and overflows it. You're constantly running late. You are accomplished in some areas, but not others. You are beating yourself up. Any of the things that I'm talking about feel resonant to you. It is worth looking into. And if you're a woman between the ages of, I would say, 28, and I'm 54 or above, and this feels resonant, you may be part of this lost generation. Because it's only in, I would say, the last 5 to 10 years that people have really spoken openly about girls and ADHD. And so we missed a huge group of us. And every single day, somebody sees one of the videos I've done on YouTube or a podcast episode or whatever going, oh my God, I just got this diagnosis. It's life-changing because you're talking about this.
Dude, like, in you talking about it, you said the word that hit me so damn hard, and I want to repeat it. I'm not crazy.
No.
Like, how many of us women, though, say that? Where we're like, we're scatty. To your point, if you've just given birth, how many women beat themselves up over the fact that they feel like they're going crazy? And speaking out loud and you saying about your own experience, girl, is so powerful because it really does give other people permission. It gives me permission, absolutely, to be able to sit here and go, oh my God, I've got it too. And I don't feel badly. Thank you.
Well, it might not change anything
right.
in terms of how you go about your day. I mean, I've become a huge fan of Post-it notes because it keeps the things front in mind of what I need to do. If you're somebody that has an issue with because again, let's recap. This is not a disorder, even though it's labeled as one. This is an issue about directing and holding your attention in appropriate manners that are connected to the setting that you're in. Everybody's going to be distracted in a 5-alarm fire where there's smoke and you see the flames. We're not going to be able to do a math problem, and we're probably going to forget our coat, right? But in other situations, if you can't understand why it is so profoundly hard for you to direct and hold your attention, it might be an issue with ADHD. And when you understand that, you can use all kinds of hacks to get around it. So number one, I use Post-it notes to keep things front and center. Number two, you can take supplements. Number three, you can see a doc about interventions. Number four, you can start to remove the things off your plate that you're not that great at because it takes like so much fuel in your brain for you to do it that you might as well not do it. You might as well ask somebody else to do it and focus on the thing that you can lose yourself in because that's where your superpower is. This is why kids get so addicted to video games. Do you want to know why? Because they're getting better at them. Like, we don't spend shitloads of time on stuff we suck at. We lean naturally and can focus and lose ourselves on the things that come easily for our brain and don't require a lot of brain fuel. And so even those areas where you're losing your focus or where things come easily, that is your own life telling you the way your brain learns. I learn with visual models. I learn by talking things out loud. No wonder I hated law school. Reading 120 pages at night? What? Like, oh my gosh, my brain does not do that. And so the really good news is A, you'll stop beating yourself up. B, as I say to my friends, we were traveling over here, Lisa and I, and somebody was with us, and he was saying, I have this book, and can I reach out to you? And I said to him, I'm going to tell you right now, I am terrible at texting back, and text is the best way to reach me. Don't take it personally. And here's an email that you can send it to too. I can just own it. And when you don't know what you're dealing with, you start to think there's something wrong with you. You know, I used to be a public defender. I worked for legal aid. And I wish I knew the numbers, but I don't know the numbers, and I don't have the research study right in front of me. But the majority of people that are in prison have an undiagnosed learning disability or a processing issue. Because what happens if you are in situations like elementary school where your brain is not developed at the level that the public school system says it should be operating and developed at, you of course start to fidget or daydream. You start to think you're stupid. Anxiety starts to develop. And of course, who wants to be in that environment? And then the school puts you in this class, which makes you feel even stupider. And it never was a behavior issue. It was a brain development issue, and not a brain development issue like something's wrong with you, but you just don't learn in the way that schools think you should learn. You're fully capable of learning, and your brain will eventually develop in other areas. But if you start that narrative of, I'm not good at this, I'm stupid, if you start feeling like you're being channeled in a direction for stupid people, then you start to believe that. And people around you start to have a narrative. So it doesn't surprise me at all. Like, I feel so strongly about this issue of early intervention for learning styles and attention and processing, because I believe it changes the trajectory of your life in profound ways.
When it comes to your health, knowledge is damn power. And my favorite health tool in my Nurture Your Bad Bitch Soul tool belt for tracking my metabolism is Lumen. Your metabolism is at the center of everything that your body does. And so there are so many benefits that come with optimal metabolic health, like actually feeling rested and energized when you wake up in the morning, better able to manage that weight that really is bringing you down, and so much more. So guys, if you want to take that next step in improving your health, then go to lumen.me and use coupon code NYBBS to get $50 off your Lumen. That is LUMEN.me and use the coupon code NYBBS, which is Nurture Your Bad Bitch Soul, to get $50 off your Lumen. Thank you guys over at Lumen for sponsoring this episode.
For me personally, and I know that this is the case for a ton of people, when you have ADHD and it's not diagnosed, what starts to happen is, first of all, your relationship with yourself severely impacted, because you can't seem to do things that seem so simple. So for example, texting people back. I would get a text from somebody like you, and immediately I would go, oh, I love Lisa. I got to text Lisa back. And then all of a sudden the dog runs across the room and an airplane flies by. Your text has flown completely out of my mind. And a couple days go by. Now, in the moment, I meant to text you back. But because, at least with my brain and ADHD, I have this inability to hold information in my brain when I get distracted. And unless it is visually in front of me, I forget what I was just thinking about. And this repeats in so many different scenarios. I know the last time that I was here, I was sharing with you that it used to drive my husband, Christopher, absolutely fucking bananas, that I would blow my nose and I would leave a Kleenex out on the counter. And we would get in these endless arguments where he would think, when he saw the Kleenex, that I was either a slob, or I think even worse, that I just expected somebody to clean up after me. And I could never properly communicate that I didn't mean to not do it. I just forgot on my way to the garbage can because something else entered my brain to finish the task. And so in terms of the relationship with myself, I spent years wondering why certain things were so easy for people, years beating myself up for the fact that I would miss birthdays and Mother's Days and keeping track of all these small details. And in terms of relationships, I think you just start to feel like you're a bad friend, or you feel like you're the one that's always dropping the ball because you can't seem to keep those kind of to-do list items that other people can be on top of. You can't seem to get them done. And so when I finally was diagnosed at the age of 47, it was like a eureka moment. For me, there was always this missing piece to understanding. I don't quite get how I can be so competent in some areas of my life and so completely incapable in other areas of my life.
And would other people also think that it was maybe a deliberate thing because they saw how competent you were in certain areas of your life?
That's a great question. Well, it was that way with Chris. That way with Chris. You know how like everybody now gets so much delivered to the house or the apartment that you get all these cardboard boxes? Well, in my mind, I would get a cardboard box, I'd rip it open, I'd take the contents out, I'd then carry the cardboard box to the garage door, and then I'd leave it there, thinking, I'll come back and do this when there's more of them. Chris has told me 1,000 times that it is a trigger for him to see a tower of cardboard boxes ready for somebody else to, because you're supposed to, as you know, slice them all, make them flat, and make it easy for recycling to pick up. He would walk in and see what I have now done, which is assemble a tower of boxes, because in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I'll get to it later. Oh, I'll get to it later. Oh, I'll get to it later. And feel like I had deliberately just decided that Chris would get around to this. No, babe, I'm really sorry, babe. I didn't mean to not do it. It's just that I had a bunch of other things, so I thought I would do that. Like constant, like everything becomes a tap dance. And so I've never thought about it that way, but you're exactly right, because I've had a couple people say to me that they can't believe that somebody who is as successful and as competent as I am, particularly in business, could be a disaster in other areas of my life. And that leads to people thinking I'm deliberately that way, and it also leads to me beating myself up about it. And see, I think this is also a reason why most people don't even understand what ADHD is. I didn't.
So thank you. That was so fascinating. And you're so right, because so for me in our friendship, I was definitely like, I know how busy you are. So I was almost just like, it wasn't out of the ADHD. It wasn't out of that. It was the fact that I really thought, you're just so busy, homie, you don't have to text me back. So I never took it personally, but I can see how people would. And then you start beating yourself up, especially if you're someone like you who's a high achiever. So someone that wants to feel good about themselves goes into it, that feels like they failed. And now that other person has that judgment on you. So that would, I assume, would just compound itself.
Yeah, and so just so like you watching know what Lisa's referring to, when we first met and became friends, Lisa said one of the most liberating things on the planet to me. And now I'm just realizing you didn't even say it because of ADHD.
No.
She said, you don't ever need to text me back. Like, it's cool if you don't text me back. And that has been the bane of my existence, because people can now reach you via DMs, they can reach you via email, they can call you and leave a voicemail, they can text you. When the stimulus or the input becomes too overwhelming, I just, like, my brain stops focusing on anything. And the intention is there. And I think that's the thing to understand, that yes, and if it were a life and death circumstance, my brain will focus on getting back to you. If it is a top priority, my brain will focus on getting back to you. If I am in a moment where I'm relaxed and there's nothing else going on, I will go from the text to the idea to formulating what I want to say back, to then putting my hands on the phone, to then completing the thought, to then rereading the thought, to then putting the send button. But if any one of those things gets interrupted, my attention goes somewhere else.
Wow. And so someone who doesn't have it may just seem like It's just sending a text back. What's the problem?
Well, see, the thing with ADHD, and this is why nobody understands what it is.
Yeah, please break it down.
ADHD is not that you can't focus. It is the inability to hold your focus on either something that comes cognitively difficult for you or to hold your focus when other more like distracting or important things pull your focus this way. And so this is why so many people, I think, go a long period of time without being properly diagnosed. And we can get more into that, but it's not about a lack of focus. It's about the fact that it's hard for you to focus and to complete tasks in certain situations. And that's a real kind of lie about ADHD. Most people with ADHD are the kind of people that can lose themselves in a video game. Or in your case, I wouldn't be surprised if you end up getting diagnosed with ADHD after this conversation, because you could spend hours in one of your drawings. But if it is a different kind of task that requires you to direct your attention on something that might be hard for you or that's not interesting to you, it drains your mental fuel faster and it makes you more prone to distraction. And so, yes, it's just a simple text, but for my brain, it's like 15 steps and it requires a lot of like effort to focus in on it.
Well, so how did identifying that it was ADHD allow you to really, I guess, be more comfortable with how you are and who you are? And then how did you use it to actually then improve your relationships with people and your business and your success?
So great question. So how did ADHD change everything? So first of all, when you get a diagnosis like this, it doesn't solve anything, but it does remove something. And that is the self-criticism. So when I was finally diagnosed at the age of 47, it was as if somebody explained something that I had been beating the shit out of myself for my entire life. It was like, oh, well, your brain just works differently. That's why this kind of stuff that comes naturally for other people is a struggle for you. That's it. That's
how much shame was around that as well?
Oh, 100% of shame. Like, I can't even begin to tell you how many birthdays I have missed, how I was the queen of, because there's a bunch of other things that go in with this. So there's something that you'll hear about called executive functioning. Executive functioning is another thinking sort of process in the brain. And executive functioning is when you have basically an administrative assistant in your brain, and it's the administrative assistant that is dictating and telling you what to do in what order. So for example, if you have to pack for a vacation, your administrative assistant might say to you, hey, the flight's tomorrow. You probably need to pack tomorrow. By the way, you might want to look at the weather to make sure you've packed the right things. By the way, you're going for 3 nights. You need 3 pairs of underwear. By the way, you're going to want running. Like all that little voice in your head that is looking ahead and planning all the sequential steps. If you have an inability to focus and hold your focus, particularly when the task that you need to do, homework, finishing a report, finishing a book that you're not interested in, solving some problem, listening to a conversation that isn't particularly interesting, the person that is in the head, the executive assistant, is like, meh. Like, we should be thinking about this thing over here. And your ability to stay engaged or your ability to pack, like packing is something that's very difficult for me. I am the kind of person, I don't care how many lists I have, I always forget to pack enough underwear. I forget to pack the right things. And so it's the fact that my attention gets pulled in different directions. My focus is laser focused, Lisa. And this is why it's so confusing. Wait a minute. I thought it was just you're distracted all the time. No, I can be laser focused in certain settings. I'm super focused right now. But in other types of task-oriented things where you have to get something to completion, it's nearly impossible for my brain to go in a linear A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
And doesn't it almost seem like a form of anxiety from the outside where you see someone a bit scatty?
Yes. Yes. And somebody that has this kind of ADHD or these attentional kind of structural issues in your brain that are different, it does seem like you're scattered. It does seem like you're rude. It does seem like you're forgetful. And you're really dealing, I think a lot about this analogy of a gas tank in a car, right? So you got to put fuel in a gas tank. And if you have a full tank, you can drive a certain distance. The way that I think about ADHD is that you and I both have a mental gas tank full of fuel. You wake up in the morning, the tank is full. If you got a good night's sleep, it's full. If you're well hydrated, it's full. If you have healthy habits, it's full. If you have certain processing, attention, or learning style differences like dyslexia or dysgraphia, certain types of cognitive functioning drain your fuel tank faster than others. And so I used to think that dyslexia just meant that you just mix up your letters, right? When I say the word dyslexia, what do you think dyslexia is?
Yeah, you mix up your B's and your D's and your G's and your J's.
Yeah, same. It's exactly what I thought. And even having a kid that got diagnosed with dyslexia, and then myself getting diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD, Lisa, it was not until I read Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath, that I profoundly understood what dyslexia actually is. And I'm going to butcher this so you can save yourself the headache of writing anything bad in the comments. I am not a PhD, and I'm not going to say this correctly. I'm going to say this so a normal person can understand it. I read about this for the first time in that book, David and Goliath. There is a chapter in that book that I believe is entitled, Would You Give Your Kid Dyslexia If You Could? And in it, Malcolm Gladwell talked all about how these wildly successful people all had dyslexia. Einstein had dyslexia, probably had ADHD too. On and on and on, example after example. And what he explained was this, that dyslexia is a developmental issue in the brain. That when you study somebody who at a kind of normal brain development standard, and let's just say, I don't know what age they did the study, but let's just say fourth grade, because that's when we went through this with our son. When you look at a brain that is developed at the normal rate, the brain, the whole brain, from the right to the left, the neural pathways, they light up from the right to the left like a Christmas tree. If you scan a brain of somebody who's dyslexic or dysgraphic or has any of that sort of processing, functioning stuff going on, it's gray matter in the middle. Meaning the neural pathways that relate to reading words, remembering words, processing meaning of words, holding meaning and comprehension. Remember reading, comprehension? That whole wiring isn't there yet. And so when you have some kind of learning style different, because you can sit in a classroom and hear it, but the reading part's really hard, or the writing part's really hard, or the retention part's really hard, or you process so much slower because your brain is not developed all that neuropathway activity. It will, and it can. You start to feel like something's wrong with you because you can't do what's being asked with you. And this is why when somebody is diagnosed with a learning disability, they are almost always also diagnosed with some low-grade anxiety. And the anxiety develops because of the learning disability, because of the processing issues, and because of the attention issues. And so for me, and what we saw with our son, was the second we understood the root cause, which was this inability to direct focus, and a brain that had not developed the neural pathways yet for reading comprehension, we knew what to do. And the problems arise, and this is what we saw with our son, this is what I felt for myself personally, what I saw with our older daughter who wasn't diagnosed until she was a junior in high school, is that there is so much criticism and there is so much anxiety around doing certain tasks like going to school or taking tests or doing whatever. And for adults, it might be about going to work. It might be you beating yourself up because you can't get through your to-do list. It might be that you feel incompetent compared to your friends. It might be that you're always running late, that you're always forgetting things, that you just relentlessly beat yourself up. These are all signs that there's a deeper issue going on, and it is most likely something related to either how you learn, like dyslexia or dysgraphia, or it is something related to your inability to direct and hold focus.
God, that was so powerful. And I love how you then use it as a way to just be honest with people. Because I think that that's super important, and being able to say, hey, look, I'm not great at this, so here's a better way to do it. Because I'm the same, I forget people's names. I have a mental block on people's names. You can tell me 8 times, and on the 9th time, I'm still gonna forget it. And I feel so bad, and I feel like the other person thinks I don't care about them. It makes me feel like I have to overcompensate. Then I start getting anxious, and in my head, 'cause I'm like, shit, what's their name? Shit, I'll crack. And now I just get like mumbly, and the words don't come out right. And then if I say the name wrong, then I get all embarrassed, and they think that I don't know them. And it just creates this overwhelming moment of anxiety. And then I'm like, I'm just not going to say someone's name next time.
Lisa just showed you what an ADHD brain does.
Oh, what?
Right there.
What did I do?
That whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
The steps you took, the beating up, the different things you thought about, the way you tried to get around it, that's a classic example. And look, there's a flip side to this. So for people that are like super studious and you love to read, you are just like you can just and absorb it up here, you might have an issue where speaking out loud is something that you just can't, like, I can absorb it all. I can write it. I'm in the background kind of person. That is my superpower. The idea of speaking in front of people, I stumble, I turn, la, 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 la. Again, with understanding what you're dealing with, you can slowly start to develop the skills to address it. And so, for me, I think that's the most important thing to understand, is that first, there was a really enormous gap in terms of people who were properly diagnosed. There was an enormous impact on women around the world, given this lost generation of women who developed and were diagnosed and treated with anxiety forever and never understood until later in life, or heck, may not even know still right now, that the core issue that they beat themselves up with is a focus or a learning style difference. And when you get down to the root of the problem, now you're empowered to do something about it. And what I find in the work that I do coaching people is that most people are working on the wrong problem. And ADHD in women in particular is one of those root causes of a lot of things that appear on the surface. Just like trauma, for a lot of people, is a root cause of things that people deal with on the surface. And it's like weeds in the garden. You can snip them off at the top, but when you snip them off, the roots just get stronger. And so your ADHD is not going to go away. There's attention issues. I still leave the damn Kleenexes on the counter. Chris is upset with me because when I make coffee, I get the milk out, I get the foamer out, I pour the milk in the foamer, I put the milk down, I go get my spoon, I make my coffee, I pour the foamer in the thing, then I put the foamer over here, then the dog barks and I look, and then I go over here. And then Chris walks in, and there's the dirty spoon with the crusted sugar on it, and the milk with the stain on the counter, and the coffee cup in here, and the foam still in it, and something in the sink. Now, did I mean to do that? No. Did I remember to come back and clean it up? No. Because what came in here, the ability, again, remember, I could focus when I was doing the coffee, and then that rang, and I focused on that. And because of the inability to hold focus too, gone. Intention was there. It's like it never even happened.
So how do you deal with it now? Now that you're aware of it, now that he's aware of it, but at the same time, he doesn't want to live with a wife that's super messy. So how do you deal, right? Because that becomes, sometimes in relationships, it becomes that little friction that just gets more and more, resentment builds, resentment builds, resentment builds. So how do you guys even work through that?
It depends on Chris's mood. Some days he will take a photo of it and text it to me.
How do you feel when that happens?
Like an asshole.
Really?
Yeah. Well,
Even though you
because
know it's part of your condition.
Well, of course, because it's sort of like one of those moments where like, why can't I just fucking do this right? Like, why?
So you do still beat yourself up a little?
Oh, of course. Of course I do, because I beat myself up. Like just today, it's, something's coming up, somebody's birthday. And I thought to myself, if I don't stop what I'm doing right now and actually get these flowers ordered, this is not going to happen. And thankfully, I went from thought to execution and got it done. But holding my attention on that, it sounds just stupid that is something that it just seems absurd that this would be something that's hard. Absurd. But it is. And I do feel like an asshole because I know what that feels like for Chris. Oh, for God's sakes. Here's Mel's shit again. He walks into our bathroom. His counter in his bathroom is like, it's as if we're in a show house. The houses people build and then people go on tours of them?
Yeah.
That is Chris's bathroom sink. My bathroom sink looks like somebody went to a Sephora and bought every sample and then dumped a bag out on top of the counter. And it's everywhere. Everywhere.
So how do you actually deal with that? Like, what have you got like a plan?
I'll tell you how we dealt with it.
Yeah, please.
When we built this house, Chris insisted that we have 2 separate sinks that were at least separated by 4 feet so I could not migrate my shit to his counter.
So you basically come up with a logistic resolve, because I think this is really important, because there's that fine line between you have it, you still feel bad about it because you don't want to upset your husband. He knows you has it. He loves you more than life itself. Oh my God, when that man's around you, like the love, oh God, he has for you. So I actually feel for him that it's like the poor guy just doesn't want to live in mess.
Yeah.
And at some point he's human and it's going to piss him off. But at the same time, you've got a condition, a different learning style, I should say, that inhibits you from doing what he needs.
Yes.
So coming up with the actual logistics and the communication between you, I think that's so important.
Well, so I have Post-it notes everywhere that remind me to follow through. The other thing is I don't leave stuff out all the time anymore.
Right.
And so, he'll do that and I'll feel terrible and I'll say, I'm really sorry. I'll be right down to clean it. Please don't clean it up. And so that's kind of one of those things that he can text me that, and he isn't doing it to rub my face in it. He's doing because I said, I don't want you to do my dishes. So text it to me and I will come down and do it. And so it's been very helpful for him to also understand that this is a default mode for me. And I don't mean to be like this.
Yeah.
Just like he doesn't mean to be a slow processor. And Chris really takes his time mulling through things. He doesn't mean to. It's how his brain works. And so imagine if I were to be like, like when he does that, it'd be like berating him for just how he is. And so there is a level of self-acceptance that a diagnosis like this reveals. There is then specific interventions, whether it is a natural or prescribed substance. There are occupational therapies. There are environmental interventions like Post-it notes or alarms on your phone, or being upfront with people that you drop the ball a lot because you struggle with focus. And there's self-acceptance. And that's about as good as you can do.
God, thank you so much for breaking that down. If someone's listening right now and they're like, that really does sound like me.
Yeah.
It's actually a lot of the problem, or it feels like it's leading to a lot of the problems they're having. Where can they go and what can they do to start to identify whether they do have it or not?
Well, I know that you're going to link to a self-assessment quiz that your team found on Psychology Today. Ned Hollowell who wrote Driven to Distraction, is the Harvard professor that broke the lid wide open on ADHD years ago. He's based in Boston. He's a wonderful guy. Dr. Amen, who you just had on, and the Amen clinics also have a lot of natural ways and a lot of books that he's written about the topic. And so the resources are out there, but I think the first step is really leaning into whether you're just in a busy period of life. Because look, I think on some level, we all have an attention problem because you're looking at short form content. You're training your brain to listen to things at 1.5. You're in this mode. That is different than sitting in a classroom and having to reread sentences because it's like they're going in your eyeballs and into space, and you're not able to hold the content. Kind of feeling overwhelmed in life is different than every cabinet door is open and you're constantly leaving everything everywhere. And so leaning into doing an online assessment, and then go talk to your primary care doctor. They're probably going to be the best resource for where you go next to understand if you truly have this or if you are just way distracted with your online habits.
Thank you. I love how frikin open online, Stuart, and I know that you're doing a bit more content on anxiety and things like that. So where can people find more of you?
The Mel Robbins podcast. We do a lot of content on all of these topics, and also just Mel Robbins everywhere on social media.
What up, my homie? Okay, if you want to actually build your confidence step by step, one video at a time, then this right here is the place. So if you're not subscribed, smash that subscribe button right now.
If you are blessed to live to 85 or older, you have a 1 in 2 chance of having